Before we begin, let me ask you something. Have you ever stood at the grave of the person you loved the most, only to find out you never really knew them at all? That moment when your world collapses, not because they died, but because of the truth they left behind. This is not just a story, it's my life. And everything changed at my husband's funeral. If you've ever been betrayed in silence, stay with me. Subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? The day of William's funeral was gray, in a way that didn't feel like weather. It felt personal. The kind of sky that presses down on you, reminding you how alone you are, even when you're surrounded by people. I arrived at the church early, too early. I had spent hours choosing what to wear, dark, conservative, respectful. The widow, that was who I was now. For 27 years, I was William's wife. Not a glamorous life, no country clubs or penthouses, just quiet evenings, holidays with just the two of us, a few vacations every now and then. We didn't have children. I couldn't, and William never pressed me for it. He said I was enough. He said that often. He also said he had to travel for work. For 6 months out of every year, he worked in another state. Logistics and consulting, he told me. Corporate contracts. He hated technology, avoided phones, said he was old-fashioned. I believed him. When I stepped inside that church, I didn't expect to see unfamiliar faces filling the pews. I assumed they were from his work, friends I'd never met, but something felt off. People weren't looking at me with sympathy. They were looking at me like I didn't belong there. Then I saw her, a woman around my age standing stiff at the front, dressed in black like me, but with a grief that was angry, not broken. Beside her, 2 adults, a man in his 30s, a woman not much younger. They looked at me as if I were poison, and I didn't understand why. Not until the service ended. I was walking toward the exit when I heard the voice, sharp, male, loud enough to turn heads. Unbelievable. She has the nerve to show her face here. I froze, turned. The man, one of the grown children, was pointing at me. His mother, the other woman, grabbed his arm, but it was too late. The words were spilling out. You ruined our family. You were nothing but a mistress, and now you want pity? Mistress? Laughter, scoffs, murmurs spread like wildfire. I couldn't breathe. I looked at the woman. Her eyes weren't confused. They were full of pain. She knew who I was. She knew, and yet I had no idea who she was. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My legs carried me out of the church, my heart pounding so loud I couldn't hear the world around me anymore. Later that night, I sat alone on the floor of my living room. Lights off, shoes still on. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I was frozen in a kind of shock that made time slow down. William had a wife, another wife, children, a life. The 6 months away each year, that was them. And me? I wasn't the wife. I was the other woman. The thing is, I had no idea. And somehow, that made it even worse. Because now, I wasn't just grieving a husband. I was grieving a life I never really had. And everyone thought I had known all along. The silence in my house was no longer peaceful. It was accusing. I wandered from room to room like a stranger in my own life, touching things that once held comfort. The smell of William's cologne still lingered faintly on the collar of the jacket hanging by the door. I should have gotten rid of it. I couldn't. Everywhere I turned, his ghost mocked me, not in anger, but in secrets. 27 years, a life I thought we built together. Holidays, birthdays, wedding anniversaries. All of it now felt like a stage play, because while I was writing love notes and planning meals for his return, he was holding someone else's hand in another state, celebrating another child's birthday, kissing another woman goodnight. And yet, I loved him. That's what made the betrayal feel like it carved through bone. I sat on the couch, clutching our wedding photo. I studied it for answers I knew I wouldn't find. Had there been signs? The late-night calls he took outside? The suitcase he never let me pack? Was it really possible that I had chosen not to see? My phone buzzed. It was a message from a mutual friend, or rather someone I thought was a friend. All it said was, "Saw what happened at the funeral. I can't believe you'd do that to his real family. Don't contact me again." Real family. Those words sliced through me sharper than anything at the funeral. It didn't stop there. That night, I discovered a string of posts circulating online. Photos from the service, my face blurred but recognizable. "The mistress who showed up in black," one caption read. She lived off his money while he was dying. Another said she was just waiting for him to die so she could cash in. I felt sick. My email inbox overflowed with hate. Messages calling me a liar, a thief, a snake. Some from people I hadn't spoken to in years, others from strangers. No one asked me what I knew. No one cared. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat at the kitchen table staring at the floor, sipping tea I couldn't taste. By morning, I was numb. And still, a part of me clung to the smallest thread of hope. Maybe this was all some misunderstanding. Maybe Helena had misunderstood William. Maybe those weren't his children. Maybe. But when I finally looked at our financial records, the truth hardened. There were flights. Every 6 months, exactly on schedule. Regular wire transfers. A second health insurance policy. Rent paid on a home I'd never seen. Every lie was now backed by a paper trail. I felt like a fool. A woman over 50, mocked online, left with no one to defend her, no children of her own, no siblings, no family left to turn to, just me, and the ghost of a man who had loved me quietly while building a louder life elsewhere. I started locking the doors more often, jumping at knocks. At the grocery store, I felt eyes on me. Whether they were actually watching or not, I didn't know. But paranoia had planted roots. I walked with my head down, like a criminal. Sometimes I wondered if this was punishment. Was I so desperate to believe in love that I let it blind me? Was the comfort of our routine so soothing that I chose ignorance over suspicion? Or was I truly just a victim of a man's double life? I didn't have the answers. Not yet. But I knew one thing. The Margaret who smiled through pain, who stayed quiet to be polite, who trusted too easily, that woman had been buried right alongside William. The woman left behind? She was about to find out what it really meant to live in the aftermath of someone else's lies. The day of the will reading felt like walking into a courtroom where everyone already believed I was guilty. I almost didn't go. I paced around my house for an hour, keys in hand, coat draped over the back of a chair. I kept thinking, what's the point? Whatever William left, it wouldn't matter. Nothing could undo what he'd done. But part of me needed to hear it. I needed to know if he at least acknowledged me in some way. I needed a reason. A fragment of closure. The lawyer's office was downtown, in a cold brick building that smelled like dust and legal tape. I arrived last. The room was already full. Helena sat with her arms crossed tightly over her chest, flanked by her 2 adult children. Their children. I hadn't even learned their names yet. To me, they were still the son who yelled at me, and the daughter who wouldn't look me in the eye. They didn't acknowledge me when I walked in. I sat alone in the back corner, clutching my purse like it was a shield. The lawyer, an older man in a tan suit with weary eyes, cleared his throat and began. He spoke plainly, without drama. William's estate was significant. Multiple properties, investment accounts, retirement funds, stock portfolios. I knew some of this, not the scope, but I knew we'd lived comfortably. William was always frugal, always talking about saving for later. I just didn't know that later came with a landmine. He began listing assets. A house in New Jersey, left to Helena, a small trust for the daughter, another for the son. I thought, okay, that makes sense. They were his kids. But I braced myself, waiting for my name to appear next, and then it did, for everything else. Margaret Turner is named the sole beneficiary of the remaining estate, the lawyer read, including but not limited to the following: the marital home in Connecticut, all retirement accounts, investment portfolios, and personal savings, effective immediately. The room went silent. I didn't even breathe. Then I heard it, the sound of a chair scraping against tile, and a gasp that broke into a choked, "What?" It was Helena's son. He stood, face flushed red with fury, pointing at me like I'd just robbed them at gunpoint. She knew. She had to have known. You don't give someone everything unless they're in on it. The lawyer raised his hand to calm the room, but it didn't matter. Chaos had already been unleashed. "You think we're just going to let you walk out with everything?" The daughter spat at me. "He was our father. You were just his distraction." I wanted to scream. I didn't ask for any of this, but I couldn't even find my voice. My cheeks burned. My throat felt like it had swallowed sandpaper. I opened my mouth, tried to say something, anything, but Helena's eyes locked with mine before I could speak. She wasn't yelling. She wasn't crying. She just looked hollow, and that hurt more than anything, because in that moment, I saw my own face reflected in hers. We were both betrayed, but somehow I was still the one painted as the thief. I stood, legs shaking beneath me. The room pulsed with tension. "I didn't know," I whispered. "I never knew." No one answered. No one believed me. And so, I walked out. Out of that office, out of the wreckage of William's 2 lives, out into a world where now I wasn't just a widow. I was the woman who stole everything, the stranger, the villain in someone else's story. And yet, I had never felt more alone in mine. I didn't open the front door for 2 days after the reading of the will. The outside world had turned into something hostile. I knew I wasn't imagining it. The glances at the grocery store, the way neighbors avoided eye contact, the 2 women whispering by the post office as I walked past. My name wasn't just being spoken, it was being smeared. The local paper ran a piece, "Secret wife inherits fortune after businessman's death." It didn't mention my name directly, but everyone in town knew who it was about. The timing, the details, the implication. It was enough. Inside my own house, I couldn't find peace either. Every corner reminded me of William, his slippers by the back door, his toothbrush still in the bathroom. I should have thrown it out. I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I sat in the kitchen staring at a folder filled with bank statements, legal documents, and property titles, all now under my name. Millions. That word didn't even feel real. When we were together, William never lived extravagantly. He liked simple things. He'd clip coupons and complain about wasteful spending. We had no luxury cars, no designer furniture. But apparently, while he was preaching frugality, he was building an empire. And now all of it was mine. But I didn't feel rich. I felt contaminated. The money didn't comfort me. It haunted me. Every dollar was a reminder that I didn't truly know the man I shared a bed with. Every asset felt like it came from a lie. I hired a lawyer, not because I wanted to fight anyone, but because I had to make sure it was real. That William hadn't manipulated the documents while impaired. That I hadn't somehow unknowingly committed fraud just by existing. The lawyer confirmed it all. William had made the changes a year before his death, while fully coherent. The paperwork was airtight. The decision had been his. But why? Why would he leave me everything, knowing it would tear his other family apart? Knowing I'd become the target of their rage? I couldn't ask him now. But the silence he left behind screamed louder with each passing day. What made it worse was the pressure building outside the legalities. Helena's son emailed me directly, furious, unhinged. He called me a fraud, a parasite. He accused me of manipulating a dying man. He threatened to go public with everything, sue me for inheritance theft, even hinted that I'd driven William to the grave with stress. Helena's daughter wasn't much better. She posted on social media about me constantly, sometimes vague, sometimes explicit. She called me that woman who hid in plain sight and preyed on a broken marriage. Her followers believed every word. People I'd never met sent me private messages telling me to give the money back, that I didn't deserve it, that I should be ashamed. The worst part? A small part of me did feel ashamed. I hadn't done anything wrong, but I had benefited from someone else's lies. One night, unable to sleep, I sat on the back porch watching the wind stir the trees, and I said it out loud for the first time. I don't want this. The house, the cars, the money, the lawsuits, the silence. I didn't want any of it. I wanted my life back. The simple one. The one where I still believed in my husband, where my world made sense. But that life was dead, and in its place, I was left holding the ashes of a man who loved me and betrayed me, who chose to protect me financially, but not emotionally, who lived 2 lives so cleanly that even in death, he managed to destroy both. And now, I was alone with the fallout, alone and hated, and no amount of money in the world could make that feel less heavy. I didn't plan to reach out to Helena, not at first. Part of me hoped she would contact me, to scream, to ask why, to accuse me to my face instead of through lawyers and online posts. But she didn't. So after another week of silence, and of waking up with my stomach in knots, I made the decision. It wasn't courage, it was desperation. I found a neutral spot, a small cafe halfway between our towns where no one knew either of us. I sent her a message, polite, careful. I told her I didn't want a confrontation. I just wanted to talk, for both our sakes. To my surprise, she replied within an hour. Tomorrow at 10. Don't be late. I barely slept that night. When I arrived, she was already seated. No makeup, dark circles under her eyes. Her hands folded tightly in front of her, like she was holding herself together through sheer will. I hesitated for a moment before sitting. She didn't smile, didn't nod, just stared at me with a tired intensity that made it hard to breathe. I opened my mouth, but she spoke first. Did you love him? The question hit me like a slap. I didn't expect that to be her first words. I thought she'd ask how long I knew, why I didn't walk away. But no, just that. Did I love him? Yes, I said softly. I did. She nodded once, almost imperceptibly. Her jaw clenched. Her eyes filled for a moment, then blinked clear again. He told me you were a girlfriend, she said. One of many before we married. I asked once if you two ever reconnected. He laughed, told me not to worry. She sipped her coffee, her hands shaking slightly. He lied to both of us. For over 2 decades, 25 years of scheduling birthdays around business trips, 25 years of watching my kids wait by the window every June, knowing he wouldn't be back until Christmas. I couldn't speak. You know what hurts the most? She continued. Not that he left everything to you, not even that you didn't know about us. It's that, for all these years, I thought I was the only one being tolerated. But turns out, we were both being kept. The word sat heavy between us. Kept. I nodded, slowly. I used to imagine our future, I said quietly. Sitting on the porch together, old and tired, watching the seasons go by. I thought we had time. She let out a bitter laugh. Time. That man divided every ounce of his time like a chessboard. Holidays were always the hardest. And now? Now my children hate me because I didn't fight harder. They think I let this happen, that I wasn't enough. I looked up. Helena, I swear to you, I didn't know. Not 1 minute. If I had, you would have left? She asked. Not accusatory, just curious. I hesitated. I don't know. I want to believe I would. But 27 years is a lot of memories to erase. She nodded again, slowly. Same. We sat in silence. 2 women, side by side, nursing identical wounds carved by the same man. Eventually, she pulled a worn envelope from her purse. He left this in our safe, a copy of his original will. Before he changed it, she slid it across the table. In it, she had been the sole beneficiary. I think he knew he was dying, she said. And I think, somewhere, he believed he had to choose. Maybe he thought leaving everything to you would make up for something. Maybe it was his idea of love. I stared at the paper. My name wasn't even on it. I didn't ask for the money, I said. I still don't know what to do with it. She looked at me, softer this time. Neither do I. We left the cafe without a handshake. No hugging, no closure. But as I walked away, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Not peace, not forgiveness, but understanding. And maybe, just maybe, that was the first step toward something that resembled healing. I didn't plan to reach out to Helena. Not at first. Part of me hoped she would contact me. To scream, to ask why, to accuse me to my face instead of through lawyers and online posts. But she didn't. So after another week of silence, and of waking up with my stomach in knots, I made the decision. It wasn't courage. It was desperation. I found a neutral spot, a small cafe halfway between our towns, where no one knew either of us. I sent her a message, polite, careful. I told her I didn't want a confrontation. I just wanted to talk, for both our sakes. To my surprise, she replied within an hour. Tomorrow at 10. Don't be late. I barely slept that night. When I arrived, she was already seated. No makeup, dark circles under her eyes, her hands folded tightly in front of her, like she was holding herself together through sheer will. I hesitated for a moment before sitting. She didn't smile, didn't nod, just stared at me with a tired intensity that made it hard to breathe. I opened my mouth, but she spoke first. Did you love him? The question hit me like a slap. I didn't expect that to be her first words. I thought she'd ask how long I knew, why I didn't walk away. But no, just that. Did I love him? Yes, I said softly. I did. She nodded once, almost imperceptibly. Her jaw clenched. Her eyes filled for a moment, then blinked clear again. He told me you were a girlfriend, she said. One of many before we married. I asked once if you two ever reconnected. He laughed, told me not to worry. She sipped her coffee, her hands shaking slightly. He lied to both of us. For over 2 decades, 25 years of scheduling birthdays around business trips, 25 years of watching my kids wait by the window every June, knowing he wouldn't be back until Christmas. I couldn't speak. You know what hurts the most? She continued. Not that he left everything to you. Not even that you didn't know about us. It's that, for all these years, I thought I was the only one being tolerated. But turns out, we were both being kept. The word sat heavy between us. Kept. I nodded, slowly. I used to imagine our future, I said quietly. Sitting on the porch together, old and tired, watching the seasons go by. I thought we had time. She let out a bitter laugh. Time. That man divided every ounce of his time like a chessboard. Holidays were always the hardest. And now? Now my children hate me because I didn't fight harder. They think I let this happen, that I wasn't enough. I looked up. Helena, I swear to you, I didn't know. Not 1 minute. If I had, you would have left? She asked. Not accusatory, just curious. I hesitated. I don't know. I want to believe I would, but 27 years is a lot of memories to erase. She nodded again, slowly. Same. We sat in silence. 2 women, side by side, nursing identical wounds carved by the same man. Eventually, she pulled a worn envelope from her purse. He left this in our safe, a copy of his original will. Before he changed it, she slid it across the table. In it, she had been the sole beneficiary. I think he knew he was dying, she said. And I think somewhere, he believed he had to choose. Maybe he thought leaving everything to you would make up for something. Maybe it was his idea of love. I stared at the paper. My name wasn't even on it. I didn't ask for the money, I said. I still don't know what to do with it. She looked at me, softer this time. Neither do I. We left the cafe without a handshake. No hugging, no closure. But as I walked away, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Not peace, not forgiveness, but understanding. And maybe, just maybe, that was the first step towards something that resembled healing. I didn't clean the garage door. For 3 days, I left the red letters smeared across the white panel, bold and angry, liar, like a brand on my soul. Neighbors drove past more slowly than usual. One of them offered to help paint over it. I declined, because part of me felt like I deserved it, and another part wanted the world to see it. To see what grief twisted into rage looked like. To see how a lie told by one man could unravel lives and leave a stranger holding the blame. But on the 4th morning, I woke up and decided I was done carrying shame that wasn't mine. I bought paint. I covered the letters. And for the first time in weeks, I looked in the mirror and didn't look away. That same day, I made a decision. If they wanted to make me a villain, I would respond like someone they couldn't define. I would not react. I would not apologize for things I didn't do. I would reclaim my life, one act at a time. I increased the anonymous donations. I transferred money to food pantries, shelters, senior homes. I funded therapy for widows, quietly, silently. I wasn't doing it to redeem myself. I was doing it because giving away pieces of that poisoned inheritance felt like cutting out thorns from my skin. But of course, it didn't take long for word to spread. Helena's daughter posted screenshots from court filings. She's trying to buy forgiveness, one post read. Guilt money, said another. Keep your dirty hands off our father's legacy. Then came the formal court notice. Helena's children were suing me, contesting the will. The grounds? Emotional manipulation, coercion of a vulnerable man, lack of mental capacity. I read the paperwork sitting alone in the same kitchen where William used to bring me tea. They were saying I manipulated him while he was dying, that I pressured him to change his will in my favor, that I isolated him from them on purpose. None of it was true. But truth didn't matter anymore. Perception did. I gave the papers to my lawyer, who assured me the case was flimsy. William's mental health had been intact at the time of the changes. There were doctor's records, witness signatures. Everything had been notarized. Still, I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. I stopped opening the curtains, until one morning I found an envelope taped to my door. No stamp, no return address. Inside was a photo. Me, outside the post office, captioned in thick marker, "How's the blood money, Maggie?" I dropped it on the floor and walked straight to the sink, vomiting until I shook. I wasn't scared for my life. I was scared of becoming what they said I was. I called my lawyer again. "I want to settle," I said. "You don't need to," he replied. "I know, but I want to." That same afternoon, I called Helena for the second time. She didn't sound surprised. "I've seen what they're doing," she said. "I didn't know about the photo. I don't want to fight anymore," I said. "I'll divide the estate, not because I owe them, but because I want to be free." There was silence. Then, "Meet me tomorrow." We met at the same cafe. This time, she looked different, tired still, but warmer, like something inside her had settled. She apologized for the things her children had done, not just the lawsuit, but the hate campaign, the posts, the rumors. "They're angry," she said. "They don't know what to do with it." "I know," I said. Neither did I. We spoke for over an hour, about grief, about betrayal, about motherhood, and the absence of it in my life. Eventually, we reached an agreement, a legal, written, and private settlement. A portion of the inheritance would go into a fund for her grandchildren. Another part would go to a nonprofit in William's name. The rest, I could do what I wanted with it. We walked out of the cafe together this time, still not friends, but no longer enemies. When I got home that night, I stared at the living room walls. For the first time since the funeral, they didn't feel like they were closing in. I still had no husband, no children, no old friends, but I had something better, a door that was beginning to open, and I was finally ready to walk through it. I didn't tell anyone I was moving, not the lawyer, not the neighbors, not even Helena. I needed the quiet. I needed the clean break. Too many people had formed opinions about me based on things they didn't know. Too many faces looked at me with either pity or contempt. There was no in-between, so I packed my life in silence, carefully, methodically. I sold the house William and I had shared, our marital home, as the will called it. I couldn't stay. Every creaking floorboard felt like a lie. Every drawer I opened reminded me of a man who kept drawers just like he kept secrets, tidy, locked, and labeled. I donated most of our furniture, gave away things that no longer felt like mine. I kept only the essentials, photo albums, my mother's teacups, a few books, clothes. I left behind his things, all of them, not out of anger, but because they belonged to another life. I bought a small cottage 2 towns over. It was modest, with a white fence and a maple tree in the front yard. There was no legacy here, no whispers. I was just another woman moving into a quiet street. For the first time in months, I slept through the night. Mornings were filled with birdsong and the distant sound of sprinklers turning on. I started each day with tea on the porch. I didn't check the news, I didn't look at my phone, I just sat, breathing. The first time someone waved at me on the street, a jogger passing by, I flinched, but she smiled, just smiled. No suspicion, no recognition. It felt like a small miracle. I found the local library and offered to volunteer. The director, a woman in her 60s named Ruth, welcomed me with open arms. She didn't ask about my past. She just handed me a box of returned books and said, "Think you can alphabetize these?" I nearly cried. I started helping in the children's reading room on Saturdays. The laughter, the movement, the life. It reminded me that there were still parts of the world untouched by betrayal. I adopted a dog, a mutt from the local shelter, medium-sized, golden with one floppy ear. I named her June, after the month everything fell apart, and the month I chose to rebuild. She followed me everywhere, slept by my bed, watched me with eyes that didn't judge. In time, Helena reached out. She'd heard about the move, asked if I was okay. I told her I was. Then, one Saturday, she came to visit. She brought cookies, not homemade, but from a bakery in her town she said I'd love. We sat on the porch, June at our feet, and talked for hours. Not about William, about books, about the news, about gardening, life. Her visits became monthly, then more frequent. One day she came with her grandchildren. They were shy at first, unsure, but June worked her magic, and by the end of the afternoon, they were playing fetch in my backyard and calling me Miss Maggie. I didn't know how to feel about it. I had never had children, never thought I'd get that title, but hearing it, tentatively, kindly, did something to me I hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of belonging. I didn't try to be anyone's replacement. I didn't offer advice. I just was there, present, patient, and maybe in that stillness, they began to see me as something other than the shadow in their past. I still got mail from old places, still saw articles pop up now and then. People don't let go of scandal easily. But in my new home, I was no longer the woman who inherited a fortune through betrayal. I was the woman who worked at the library, who adopted a shelter dog, who had a neighbor named Ruth and a porch with wind chimes. And in this quiet, gentle life, I started to feel whole again. Not the same woman I was before. That woman was gone. But someone new, someone stronger, someone who had survived the fire and walked out of it with grace. It was a Saturday when it happened. A crisp, sunny morning, the kind where everything feels peaceful, where even the air seems to forgive. I had just returned from the farmer's market, June trotting beside me, when I noticed the envelope on my front step. No return address, no handwriting, just like the one from before. I froze. The last time this had happened, it ended with me retching over my kitchen sink, shaking from fear and shame. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I wouldn't let a sealed envelope take my peace. Still, my hands trembled slightly as I opened it. Inside were photocopies, documents, legal filings, comments from an online forum, and at the top, one bold sentence in red marker. "You thought we were done?" I didn't need a signature to know who sent it. Helena's son. I had heard through a neighbor that he hadn't taken the settlement well, said his mother had betrayed their father's memory by making peace with me, that she had sold him out for a fund and some apologies. Apparently, he'd become obsessed, convinced that William had been coerced. He was scouring old emails, reaching out to former colleagues of William's, and collecting anything he could use to reopen the case. That envelope was his warning. He wasn't done with me. I called my lawyer immediately. He told me to stay calm. Nothing in the papers was new or actionable, but still, just hearing the words out loud again, manipulation, fraud, unlawful influence, it pulled something old and raw back into the light. By Monday, the local news had picked up whispers of the new accusations. Just a blurb, just enough. I stayed indoors for a week. The anxiety returned, wrapping its fingers around my throat like it had in those early days after the funeral. June never left my side. At night, I sat in bed with my laptop closed, trying to keep my hands from shaking. Then, Helena called. "I heard what he's doing," she said. "I'm sorry." I stayed silent. "He's angry," she continued. "But he's not well, Maggie. He's not seeing things clearly. He's trying to destroy me," I said. "No," she said firmly. "He's trying to punish someone because he doesn't know what to do with his grief, and I will not let him use me, or William's ghost, to do that." 2 days later, she showed up at my door. She had called the Attorney General's office herself and filed a statement defending me. She had gone on record. I had not coerced William. He had been clear, sound of mind, and made his choices out of his own guilt, not manipulation. She stood by me, publicly, and when it was time for the hearing, to review whether the case could even be reopened, she sat beside me in the courthouse. Our lawyers spoke. The judge reviewed the evidence. Then, in less than 30 minutes, it was over. Case dismissed. No grounds, no new proof, no reopening. Outside the courtroom, we stood together while reporters shouted questions. I didn't speak. Helena did. "She is not the villain," she said. "She is another victim of the same man who deceived us all. My son needs help, not more pain, and Margaret deserves peace." I cried in the car afterward, not because of relief, but because someone believed me, publicly, fiercely. Later that week, I met Helena at the park. We sat under a large oak tree, watching her granddaughter play on the swings. She handed me a sandwich and said, "You know, I used to think you were the woman who stole my husband." I didn't respond. She smiled gently. "But now I know. We were both just trying to survive the same storm, from different windows." We sat in silence for a while, just breathing. I realized something then. This wasn't the end of the pain, but it was the end of the chase, the end of trying to prove who I was and wasn't to people who had already decided. Let them talk, let them speculate. I had truth, and I had peace, and for the first time since William's funeral, I finally had someone standing beside me when I needed it most. The house I bought was quiet in the kind of way that doesn't feel lonely. It felt earned. The soft hum of the wind through the trees, the occasional bark from June in the backyard, the creak of old floorboards settling beneath me. After everything, I had learned to cherish stillness. I started to build something new. Nothing grand, nothing headline-worthy. Just life. Real, quiet, simple life. Quiet. I joined a community gardening group, signed up for weekly cooking classes at the senior center. I volunteered at the library on Mondays and Fridays, reading to children whose parents were too busy or too tired. No one asked about my past. No one recognized me as that woman. Here, I was just Margaret, Miss Maggie, to some. And I liked it that way. I still got the occasional letter, thinly veiled messages from old acquaintances, former neighbors, sometimes even reporters trying to revisit the story. I tossed them all. They didn't deserve space in this life I was building. Once, Helena came for a weekend. She brought a pie and a photo album. We looked through pictures of William, not the ones I knew, but the ones she did. Birthday parties, school plays, a man in a Halloween costume with his kids in tow. I expected to feel pain, but mostly, I felt distance. She asked if I wanted to keep a few pictures. I took one, just one. A candid photo of William laughing with a baby girl on his shoulders. His daughter, the same daughter who once called me a thief. I framed it, put it in the back hallway, not as a shrine to him, but as a reminder of the truth, of the weight of deception, of what it cost everyone. Helena's relationship with her children remained strained. Her son had moved away. Her daughter kept her distance. But slowly, there were small steps. A phone call here, a shared lunch there. I never asked. It wasn't my place. But I saw the effort in Helena's eyes, the mother trying to rebuild a bridge from ashes. And one day, she brought them with her. It was fall, crisp air, leaves swirling like golden confetti. I had set the table outside. A simple meal, roasted vegetables, baked chicken, fresh bread. Helena arrived with her daughter and 2 small children. The same granddaughter I'd seen at the park. And a boy, younger, holding his mother's hand. I was nervous, so was she. But kids are funny. They don't carry the burdens adults do. The little girl ran to June instantly. The boy followed. Helena's daughter, the daughter, stood stiffly at first. Then, after some awkward silence, she looked me in the eye and said, "They call you Miss Maggie at the library." I nodded. "They like you," she added. Her voice was measured, controlled. "They're good kids," I said. We didn't talk about William, or money, or court cases. We talked about school lunches, about the weather, about dogs and books and recipes. Nothing that carried weight, but it was enough. After they left, I sat alone on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, a cup of tea in hand. The house was still, but not empty. I looked around at the home I had created, the shelves filled with donated books, the garden I'd started to plant, the rug June had claimed as her throne, the laughter that had, briefly, filled the air that afternoon. It didn't replace the past, it didn't erase the betrayal, but it gave me something else, a beginning. And for the first time, I let myself think, maybe I'm not just surviving anymore. Maybe, just maybe, I'm starting to live. The invitation came in a simple card, white with gold trim. Helena's handwriting neat and deliberate. Christmas Eve, dinner, bring June. No pressure, but we'd love to have you. I stared at it for hours, unsure whether to cry or smile. A year ago, I was the woman who had stolen her husband's legacy. Now I was being invited to her family's table. It didn't feel like a victory. It felt fragile. Still, I went. The drive was quiet. Snow lined the roads in soft layers, the world muted in winter's hush. June sat in the back seat, tail thumping every few minutes, her energy a comfort. When I arrived, Helena met me at the door, wrapped in a red sweater, her silver hair pinned back. She hugged me, not stiffly, not out of politeness. It was a real embrace, one that said, "I see you, and I don't resent you anymore." The living room was warm, full of soft music and pine-scented candles. Her grandchildren were already running in circles. Her daughter gave me a small nod from across the room. Not a smile, but not a glare either. And that was enough. Dinner was simple. Roasted turkey, mashed potatoes, vegetables, 2 kinds of pie. We ate, talked, passed plates like we'd done it 100 times. And yet, for me, every moment felt surreal. Halfway through the meal, the little boy, her grandson, turned to me and asked, "Are you really Miss Maggie from the library?" I laughed. "That's what they call me." He nodded, satisfied, then added, "Mom says you read the best stories." I glanced at his mother. Her eyes met mine. And this time, she smiled. Later, after the dishes were cleared and the kids were building a Lego tower near the tree, Helena sat beside me on the couch with a glass of wine. "You know," she said, "last year, I thought this night would never happen. I thought I'd never be able to look at you without anger. I nodded, quiet. But now, she continued, when I see you, I don't see betrayal. I see survival. I see grace. I felt my throat tighten. I looked at the tree, the lights, the stockings, this home, this family, so different from mine, so far from what I thought I'd have. And yet, here I was. I never tried to replace you, I whispered. I never even knew I had anything to replace. I know, she said. Now I do. We didn't speak after that. We didn't need to. Later, just before I left, her granddaughter came up to me with a handmade card, stick figures drawn in marker, one with a gray ponytail, the other with a floppy-eared dog. It said, "To Tia Maggie, Merry Christmas, Tia, Aunt." I stood at the door, card in hand, and my heart broke open. Not from pain, but from the gentlest kind of healing. I had been cast as the outsider, the threat, the thief. But here, in this moment, in this warm, imperfect, complicated room, I had a place, a new family, a new identity, one not built on someone else's secrets, but on my truth, my choices, and the quiet dignity of having endured. And as I drove home that night, snow beginning to fall again, I realized something. I had lost everything I thought mattered, and somehow I had gained something even more real. Spring arrived slowly, gently peeling back the cold from the earth. The maple tree in my front yard sprouted green leaves like tiny promises, and birdsong returned to the mornings. There was peace in the air, an unspoken understanding that some things end so others can begin. I walked June every morning through the neighborhood trails, waving to familiar faces, chatting with the librarian about new releases, helping children pick out books on rainy afternoons. No one whispered about my past here. No one asked about William. They knew me simply as Miss Maggie, the woman who read aloud with too many voices, who always had dog treats in her coat pocket, who smiled even when her eyes sometimes carried shadows. And that was enough. But it wasn't always easy. Sometimes the past came back in small ways, a memory, a photograph tucked in an old book, an article someone forwarded without thinking. Sometimes, at night, I would wake up reaching for a space in bed that no longer belonged to anyone. But the ache was different now. It didn't bleed. It pulsed. Quiet, manageable. I had learned to live with it. One afternoon, I sat on my porch with Helena. We didn't talk much anymore when we met. We didn't need to. The silence between us had shifted from awkward to sacred. We drank tea, watched June roll in the grass, listened to the laughter of her grandchildren in the yard. Her daughter had started coming by more often. Her son, still distant, had written a letter of apology, short but genuine. Healing was never linear, but it was happening. "I think about him sometimes," Helena said, watching the sky. "Not the lies, just the moments, the man he let us see." I nodded. "Me too." We didn't pretend the good erased the bad. We didn't wrap him in forgiveness he hadn't earned, but we acknowledged the pieces he left behind and the strength it took to rise from their ruins. "I'm glad we didn't let him take everything from us," I said quietly. Helena looked at me. "He didn't. We still had ourselves, and now we have this. This, an unlikely bond, born from betrayal but shaped by choice." When she left that day, I stayed on the porch long after the sun dipped low. June rested her head on my foot. The breeze carried the scent of blooming lilacs, the kind my mother used to grow. And I thought about the woman I was a year ago, the woman who stood at a funeral and learned that everything she knew was a lie, the woman who was humiliated, attacked, abandoned, the woman who inherited not just a fortune, but a curse. I had buried that woman, not with spite, with reverence, because she survived. And in her place, I had become someone stronger, someone who didn't need to scream to be heard, someone who didn't need to prove anything to anyone, someone who took a broken life and rebuilt it, one quiet, steady brick at a time. I hadn't just found peace. I had claimed it, on my terms, not by revenge, but by outliving the storm, by outlasting the whispers, by choosing to walk in truth when every lie had begged me to crumble. I stood, stretched, and watched the last light disappear behind the trees. Tomorrow would come, as it always did, and I would be ready. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.